Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Fighter Heart podcast. I'm here sitting with Howie today. How's it going, man?
It's going pretty good, man. How are you doing?
Good, good. Thanks for taking the time. So we like to get into it right away over here. So if you could just give us, a little brief rundown about your background, where you're from, how you grew up, and then get right into your Fighter Heart story. We'll take it from there.
Yeah, yeah. So I actually grew up in New Hampshire, tiny little town on the lake, graduating class of 33. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, I enlisted in the Army after my junior year, finished out my senior year, and then literally graduated, got on a bus, went to basic training in infantry school, airborne school, had a strong desire to be in the military. My whole life leading up to that point, and really wanted to make the most of my life in that realm. I wanted to be an Airborne Ranger. I went in with a Ranger contract. Um, After airborne school, just found myself kind of half lucky, half in the right place at the right time to end up in a really unique Ranger unit. Um, from there, did Ranger school, did a lot of schools before we deployed to Iraq. Did two 12-month deployments in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, and then tried out for the Golden Knights, which is the Army's parachute team. So if you've ever gone to a big air show, you've seen the team jump in probably.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Spent 5 years skydiving all over the country. I've jumped everything from air shows to tractor pulls to Monday Night Football games, Yankees games. Well, yeah, about 2,500 skydives over the course of going through free fall school in 2002 until I was injured in 2012. Um, and it just kind of, after all of that, after deployments, skydives, everything, I'd started to train for triathlon and was trained for my first Ironman. And myself and another Golden Knight teammate out on a quick ride in Missouri, and distracted driver crossed over the rumble strip, hit me from behind, crashed us both into a ditch, and I woke up paralyzed from the waist down.
Jesus. Oh, to rewind a little bit, you said you always had a desire to join the military. Where did that desire come from? Did you have like parents in the military or anything?
Yeah, most of my family has served in some way or another on both sides. My grandfathers um, were in the Army. My grandmother on my mom's side was Women's Army Corps way back in like World War II. And then my dad and all my uncles served in some branch. My dad did 26 years in the Guard. Um, I was the first to join up, and then my brother joined the Guard. My sister joined the Navy. In '04, we were actually all deployed. My dad was in Afghanistan. Me and my brother were both in Iraq, and my sister was on the USS Truman in the Mediterranean.
Wow, so you were pretty much bred for it.
Yeah, yeah,
So, to go to the accident now. So, you were riding your bike, you said,
yeah. We were cycling.
and someone wasn't paying attention and they hit you.
Yeah, just he said he was changing the station on his radio and crossed over. It was kind of like kind of in the middle of nowhere in Missouri, kind of a country highway, big breakdown lane, big shoulder, um, and he just, bad, just perfect timing of bad luck, and crossed over the white line, hit me from behind, going about 65 miles an hour.
Oh,
Um, yeah, like I said, I woke up in the hospital. The bits and pieces I think I remember, I honestly don't even know if I remember. It's like one of those things where you don't know if it's from people telling you, you've suddenly made these memories. But I don't remember the accident itself. I remember the turnaround point. We turned around at about 10 miles and we were headed back. We were about 3 miles from the hotel when it happened. But in the accident, not only did I break my back, but I also had a pretty nasty laceration that went up and hit my femoral artery. Um, Unfortunately, they didn't know that right away. So by the time I was life flighted to Columbia, I'd lost quite a bit of blood. And the surgeon that met the helicopter identified the wound, took me in, fixed it. He was actually a Ranger Battalion guy that had gotten out and become a surgeon. So kind
mm,
of a cool little twist of fate for some
yeah.
Rangers.
Did you, so you're saying you don't really remember like getting transported to the hospital or anything?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the stuff I think I remember, I don't even know if I've just created in my head as far as being on the life flight. It's like really hard to say, which I think is good. I think a lot of people definitely struggle with when you have a traumatic injury, the traumatic experience is, the mental side of is already hard enough, and then you pile that on. And I kind of got lucky that I didn't have to kind of solve that problem. I was able to just focus on um, the physical problem of how do I move forward from here. But I will say, when you go from the top to the bottom, um, it's definitely a devastating loss.
Of course, I could imagine. So what do you remember when you woke up? What did the doctors tell you?
Um, I mean, apparently they told me a lot of times that I was paralyzed because I just like kept waking up and being like, kind of like, what's going on? And I think it was like maybe day three. I'd had, the surgery to repair my femoral artery. I'd had a surgery to repair my back. And I was just like, hey, someone get my iPad. And I knew about paratriathlon thanks to reading about it in a triathlon magazine. I'd read about the founder of Challenge Athletes Foundation. And so I just started looking at paratriathlon, started looking at hand cycles, and everyone was like, dude, maybe you shouldn't ride a bike anymore. And I was like, honestly, I was like, I knew what the injury meant for my career. Like I wasn't, you know, uh, I wasn't pretending like I was gonna pop up and start running. I was pretty quick to accept, what had happened, and I was just like, look, I know I can't do what I was doing, um, but I can still ride a bike. Like I could still do paratriathlon. So like I need a focus point, and so I
Yeah.
just started right away looking into it and adding it into my rehab actually.
So how long were you in the hospital for, and then when did rehab begin, and what did that entail?
Yeah, so I was in ICU for like 2 to 3 weeks, and then like there's a lot that goes into figuring out those next steps as far as where I was going to rehab, and I did a bunch of Google searches and found a place in Chicago at the time. It's called the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago. Now it's called the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab. Um, they took the military insurance that I had, and I watched this video where Christopher Reeves, Superman, is talking about how it's at the forefront. And when you hear someone like that speak about a place, I was like, all right, I think this is going to give me the best opportunity to potentially walk again. If nothing else, it'll be the best rehabilitation I can get to become independent again. And so shipped me from Missouri to Chicago. And then I was there for like 5.5 months. I did half of that time inpatient and half of it outpatient, walking therapies, learning how to get around in my wheelchair, how to transfer. And at that time, I met one of my physical therapists was also an Ironman. So it's just like these like weird little twists of fate. And she's like, "Oh, you got hurt training for an Ironman, and you want to do paratriathlon." There's actually the only club in the country at that time in 2012 was in Chicago, and it's called Dare to Try. Also started by a wounded veteran and two of her friends. I don't know if you've heard of her, Melissa Stockwell, um, but just phenomenal person. She was the first female to lose a leg above the knee in Iraq, way back in '04. Has been to 4 Paralympic Games now, but she started Dare to Try, and I got linked up with them while I was inpatient, and just worked it out with my doctors where I could start swimming again, I could start hand cycling, bought like a cheapo racing wheelchair, had a guy from RIC helping me learn how to push that, and so as I was doing this, 5.5 months of very intense walking therapies and everything else, I was also training full on and getting back in shape. And I did my first paratriathlon a month after I got out of rehab.
A month at, oh wow,
Yeah,
geez.
that's 7 months when I did my first one.
So rehab was like what was a day in the life for rehab wise?
Um, I mean, it evolved. I'll say that at first, like there is like a huge mental and emotional component that goes into this type of injury, any type of traumatic injury. But getting out of bed is physically and mentally taxing. Um, so, every day it's hospital life, eating hospital food and then getting up and going to, there was almost always like an hour of physical therapy, usually some type of walking therapy. At first, it was more, strengthening and coordination type things. And then there's occupational therapy at the same time where you're working on a little bit more balance, you're working on transfers, learn how to get around your wheelchair. And as you develop, you start learning how to do wheelies and, just like really becoming independent, how to simple things, how to cook from your wheelchair, how to do your laundry from your wheelchair, how to shower, get dressed from a wheelchair. Because you're basically relearning life. And at the time I was 30 and I was, relearning, you know, how I'm going to get from point A to point B.
Yeah. So it wasn't a situation where you could have like prosthetics or anything like that. You had to be in the wheelchair.
So with the walking therapies, we did try some kind of like orthotics. They have like different, basically braces, almost like Forrest Gump as a kid type braces, where they go from foot all the way up.
Yeah.
Kind of locked in, and it's like keeps your knees and ankles locked in. And so you're kind of like teetering around on these straight legs with a walker and forearm crutches. And you're just trying to get those pathways to like fire back up and see what muscles are firing, which ones aren't. There's a lot that goes into a spinal cord injury as far as the swelling around the injury can make it appear to be worse than it is sometimes. And so that was my case. Was I was about belly button high initially, and then slowly I started to get a little bit more sensation and like a little bit of. I never got everything back. Like I can't functionally walk around, but for whatever reason I got adductors back, so I can like bring my knees together, which sounds like not very helpful, but in the world of being in a wheelchair, I can like hold my soda like while I push around. I have both hands free, so it's not super functional as far as walking went, but like I got that. You get a little bit of return, and it starts to feel good, and it motivates you to like keep working. But at some point, I think like it either comes back or it doesn't. And we just got to the point where it was like, all right, this is probably everything that we're going to see return, and it's not very functional. So I definitely focused pretty intensely on being unbelievably independent in my wheelchair and then do triathlon.
So a month after you get out of rehab, right? That was your first event you did?
Yeah, I went home. I was still in the Army at the time. Went back to Fayetteville, North Carolina, stationed at Fort Bragg with the Gold Knights at the time, and moved back into a super inaccessible home. They did their best to modify your place, but at the end of the day, like a 2-story when you're in a wheelchair is just
not gonna work. Yeah.
Yeah, you're taking like like that seat up the stairs that takes like 30 minutes, and just it wasn't. That part was like pretty overwhelming for me. Going back when you're in rehab, like you can kind of set aside what you've lost and kind of focus on the present, and kind of like moving towards those little goals that they give you. Once I was back, like there was definitely a period of time where, it's almost like devastating again to be back in my home. And I told people it was kind of like I was living with the ghost of myself, and so, I wasn't able to do anything with the Gold Knights, but they definitely, were unbelievably supportive. Some of my best friends ever, teammates and leaders in that unit. And so they were an unbelievable force behind me getting independent and going the direction I needed to as far as doing my military retirement and getting me set up. And it wasn't long after that so I did the first race at 7 months, and then at 8 months, actually my first race for Team USA in San Diego. So I started competing internationally pretty quick and finding sports camps, and I tried everything. I knew I was going to do triathlon, but I did like sports camps, like with the Valor Games and in Warrior Games, where I was doing like wheelchair basketball and wheelchair archery and wheelchair table tennis and swimming and like just every sport, because I didn't know what would click, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss an opportunity to find something I was, passionate about or just really enjoyed. So I sucked at basketball before I got hurt, but then like wheelchair basketball changes the whole game, and I'm not great at it, but it's fun. Like it's super fun to get out there and
Yeah.
rip around. So I was doing a lot of stuff both on the civilian side and the military side, as far as like different camps, and those camps are they help develop community. And so I was developing a community before I even left the military of both veterans and civilians that had similar disabilities, other disabilities. And it was unbelievable, inspirational, and motivational for me as I, journeyed towards a life outside of the military and into the disabled world.
So to rewind a little bit, give us a little bit about what your mindset was going into that first event after rehab. So like, were you like, oh, I'm gonna win this? Like, were you are you expecting to win?
So, well, my first race was like a local sprint triathlon. I was the only person in a wheelchair there. Like, I just wanted to go and do one and see what I was capable of. And I don't know, I don't remember my finishing time. I would probably be a touch embarrassed to even go back and look at it. Because I definitely, like hand cycling and racing wheelchair and swimming without being able to kick are just three different beasts, And
How do
while I
you
had
swim
started,
without kicking? I don't even know how it's possible.
yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the day, like everyone floats enough. And then, using a wetsuit pants, strapping your legs together, you're you're basically just doing a forward crawl like normal, but a lot of extra drag, so it slows
Yeah,
you down. Yeah, that first race was brutal. It was hot. It was North Carolina, but I finished, and a bunch of my teammates also did triathlon, so they came out, did the triathlon with me. We had a little celebration. It was pretty awesome, and it definitely, like, at that point I felt like I knew I wanted to do paratriathlon, but until you do it, like you don't know. And so once I did it, I was like, yep, like this is still freaking hard, and I want to be good at it. And they had just announced that it was going to be in the Rio Paralympic, so it was like really getting going, as far as like becoming like a big sport. And I think everyone that gets a disability has a disability. Like if you're into sports, knows that the Paralympics are the pinnacle. And I think it's easy to say like, oh, I'm going to go to the Paralympics, like that's going to be my goal. And that was on my radar, but it definitely wasn't like the end all be all, like, oh, this is like what I have to do. I was just like, I just want to chase this sport and chase getting better at it, and see where I land. So the first couple of years, definitely, it was for fun and community, and um, it just kind of developed into something that turns out I was actually really good at.
I see a couple hundred medals behind you. So,
So actually, these are all my military challenge coins. Well,
oh, okay.
yeah, this is like that's my sword from the Golden Knights, my retirement certificate. So yeah,
Okay.
we actually when we got back from the games, though, if you look like right here, you can see like a White House coin that I got from Bush way back in like 2008, and then
Oh,
right beside it, I coined Joe Biden at the when we went to meet him like a month ago, and so that's a presidential coin from President Biden.
oh wow.
Yeah, so
Very cool, man.
yeah.
So what's your training process like going into one of these events?
Yeah, I mean, depending on what level you want to compete at, right? Like I said early on, I was doing it for fun. So I didn't have a coach. I was just kind of swimming and riding my bike and pushing my chair as I felt, like if I felt like riding that day, I rode. If I felt like swimming, I swam. And it's more than enough to cross the finish line. And then in 2016, I got a coach. I was like, oh, maybe, like as I was learning, like what it really takes to like go to the top level. I knew I needed a coach, so I started working with a coach. And by 2017, I won the national championship, um, which, um, humble brag. There's also not a ton of people that do paratriathlon in a wheelchair in the U.S. Sadly, hopefully, we're going to build that. Um, but there was, that was like my fourth national championships, and I'd gotten like destroyed at each one. So each time I got a little better, and then I won that one, and it kind of sparked something where I was like, okay, like I should like really buckle down and get serious about this. And at the same time, I got an invitation to go live at the Olympic Paralympic Training Center in Colorado Springs and moved down there with the goal of going to Tokyo. That was 2018. And so it was basically like, okay, we're going to train for 2 years with a coach full time, live there, basically military style. You're in the barracks, there's a cafeteria, you swim, bike, run,
all day.
yeah, all day. Like when you're not doing that, it's because you're doing recovery to get ready for the next workout. And uh, COVID hit early 2020. And then during COVID, I ended up in the Denver VA for 5.5 months. I had to have a pretty gnarly hip surgery, had a bad bone infection. Uh, yeah. And so I spent, the games had been delayed a year, but I spent most of 2020 in the hospital, came out, immediately started training, trying to catch back up. 2021, I did like 5 or 6 races almost back to back in the spring and into the summer, to try to qualify for the Tokyo Games. And I think that year I needed to be like, I think they ended up taking like the 11th ranked person in the world. So they took like 1 to 11. And I was 13th.
Ah,
So, I know, right? So it was like so close. And so, uh, just with the way COVID rules were working at the time, when they gave me the call and said I didn't make the team, it also meant that I had to leave the training center. Um, and so I got like a 30 days to vacate kind of notice. And at the same time, everyone else got like a 30 days until we go to
Tokyo.
the pre-camp for Tokyo. And so I was like packing a U-Haul as everyone was packing their bags. And so my whole team, everyone that I was training with, left to go to Tokyo, and I moved back to Denver. And I again, it was crushing. Like you just when you work that hard towards the goal and you fall short, right? Like um, I think when you talk about adversity, like that's what defines greatness, right? Like anyone can be naturally great at something or have everything go their way, and that's great, but you don't really know yourself until you face some adversity and trip up and fail, and then that's when you find out who you really are because you get to make a decision at that point, like I did, which was, okay, do I cash it in? Like, do I do I just call it and say I'm not good enough for this, or do I shift focus, change how I'm doing things, do it a little different, and try to go for the next games? And that's exactly what I did. I found a different coach that I'd worked with before, and we sat down for like 2 hours in his garage and just kind of hashed out a plan. What does the next 3 years look like before the Paris games, and what can I do better and differently to qualify? And so we just got to work.
Well, Paris games are just happened, right?
Yeah, yeah. Just we were just there in September. So
Oh, so you went, you made it.
yeah, yeah. And so yeah,
Oh,
so I went from like I said, I was ranked 13th in the world. And then by the end of that season, even though I didn't go to the Tokyo games, we still had a couple more races and we still had a world championship. And I think I finished like 7th at Worlds, my best finish ever at Worlds. It bumped me up into the top 10 overall rankings. And then 2022, by the end of that season, I think I was ranked like 6th in the world. And then by the end of 2023, I was actually ranked first in the
oh,
yeah,
wow.
in overall points, just the way they fell, just the races I did versus other people. Like I ended up with the most points and basically locked myself in early to the Paris games. So I was able to focus this whole spring and summer on just training and getting ready for those games.
That's
And
freaking awesome.
yeah, I know when you go from like not making it to like getting that early call that like you made it and you know that you're not just going to go like even if I'd made the Tokyo team, like I can be honest with myself and know I was going to go and I was going to compete, but I was not going to compete at the level that was, going to be anything more than probably last place, which I would have still been super proud of because I did put in a lot of work. But it was really nice this time to know that not only did I qualify, but like I was going there to be competitive and go there with the best possible chance of having a high performance.
That's sick. So you almost hung it up in
I
that guy's garage 2 hours later, and now you're in Paris. And how'd you do in Paris?
Yeah, so here we go. Here's some more adversity for you since the theme, right? And so leading up to the games, I mean, you're getting everything you can ready. And unfortunately, the racing wheelchair that I was in was just giving me such a hard time. Like it was costing me time, just as it had aged. So I needed a new racing chair, which you can't go to your local bike shop and buy. You can't just go buy one off another person. They're custom fit. Um, it needs to fit just like a running shoe fits. It needs to fit perfectly. Otherwise, you're losing performance. So I worked with Top End, and which is like one of the most well-known racing chair brands out there, and they got it done. They pushed hard to get me in a chair this summer. Phenomenal chair, um, but because of my disability, I sit kind of funky in a racing wheelchair compared to most people. And so we had to kind of modify and make a bracket to make my legs be in the position that made me perform the best. And so I pushed in that chair for about a month before we went to the games, and it's fast. Like I was the fastest I'd ever been in the racing chair, fastest I'd ever been on the bike, swimming the best, like ready to rock and roll. Got to the games, tapered super well, felt great. And I don't know if you saw in the media, but we were swimming in the Seine, something that hadn't been done in like 60 years. They
Yeah.
did like a 1.5 like $1 billion cleanup process to make it happen. Um, missed. We had to move our race the first day because the water quality wasn't good. Got to do it the second day. Swam in the Seine. Man, swimming into the. You think swimming with dragging your legs is hard? Try doing it into the current.
Yeah.
Yeah, brutal swim. Just a phenomenal bike course. We were racing on the Champs, on the, like up to the Arc de Triomphe on the cobblestones, like Tour de France style, just Eiffel Tower in the background, like going
Wow.
over the freaking Point Alexander Bridge, like just people just going berserk, banging, cheering, like it was wild on the bike. Um,
Was it
train,
surreal? Was it surreal
yeah,
like doing that?
yeah, I mean, it's
Like
like one of those things where you're trying to stay as focused as you can, but at the same time, like you can't shut out how loud parts of that course were. Um, and it just cranked me up. I mean, I was just like riding the high. I was just my swim was I was far back and I was just making it up on the bike, just chasing people down, having a blast on the bike, and then transition to the run. You transition on the Invalid Bridge, go out on the run course, and man, just grind and trying to chase down fourth place. And me and another guy from France, we were passing the fourth place guy, and the part that we had fabricated for my feet broke just like
oh
so quick, like just broke. And when it broke, my feet hit the ground, and like Ben Hur chariot style just flipped me right over onto my face, spit me out of the chair, and like I literally went from like just being so stoked to like sitting on the ground, like just sitting on the ground. And
yeah.
as quickly as I could, like fortunately there was an official there, uh, got my chair righted. I knew that like there was no way that I could sit on it the way that I needed to. And so after we got a couple more volunteers to help kind of pick me up and wedge my feet in, I sat in like the funkiest position. I'll send you some pics, but I've got a picture of me leaving transition looking the way it should, and then a picture of me finishing looking the way it shouldn't. Uh,
Yeah.
but I was not like taking a DNF at that race. Like I was gonna finish that race. Like I talked about it. I was like, I'm going there to compete for a medal. I'm like, but I promise you, no matter what happens, like I'll crawl across the line if I have to. And basically did. I pushed my racing chair with one arm so I could use my other arm to hold me in the bucket and push the last like quarter mile and cross the finish line and kind of a world of hurt. I was in a lot of pain, but got it done.
Imagine, yeah. I
Yeah,
can't
and dead last. It took me a while to get back in the racing chair and get it going. And so that's frustrating, as you can imagine. But like in the world of racing, I've never crashed in my racing chair ever. Like it's just never happened. I've crashed my bike hundreds of times. Uh, I've crashed my bike in races. I've always finished, but I've never crashed in the racing chair. And then like,
And then
yeah, I should have, done it like a good football team, and you get that big loss during the season and not during the playoffs type thing. But
yeah.
yeah, I took the L at the games.
You still finished, man.
I know, and I mean, at the end of the day, like, it was an epic experience. An experience that probably no one will ever have ever again, like in our lifetime. Like, we will never see the games in Paris the way they were. Like, even if they go back to Paris, it won't be the same, right? Um, so to say that, I was the first U.S. men's wheelchair H1 classification to ever go to the games, is to me is like a big deal. Like, it shows how hard I worked, and I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of the people that supported me along the way. It took more than a village. Doctor, staff at the VA, my coach, Ken Axford, just like putting up with me is a whole other process. And then my handler, one of my buddies, Josh, he was the guy that helps me get to races, and it was my handler at the race, and family, friends. I mean, my dad and his wife flew all the way to Paris to cheer me on, which is a big ask, of anyone.
Yeah.
It's a big ask. So
Sure, he didn't mind going to Paris though.
he bought my tickets at the end of last year when I finished ranked first. I hadn't even qualified yet.
He knew.
Yeah, he just messages me and he's like, "I saw you finished. You're ranked first. I bought hotel and flights, like, it's booked." And I was like, "Dude, like, I haven't qualified yet. Like, we still got, like a race in March to qualify." And he's like, "You're good. I'll see you there."
He's
And
not superstitious, I guess.
I mean, I think everyone's probably a little stitious, right? But
Yeah.
at the same time, it's like, you either put in the work or you don't.
And he
And
knows how hard you work.
yeah, and and there's definitely something to be said about, luck is like, when hard work meets opportunity sometimes. Uh,
Mhm.
but at the same time, like, you can make opportunities happen. You can go and do the work and set yourself up. And having a great coach like I do, like, we made sure that I hit the races I need to hit, in peak condition, and locked it in. So, like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Incredible,
and
dude.
yeah, and then I just got a little unlucky at the games. Yeah, like,
So what's next now? Like, what are your plans now?
yeah. So we just raced Worlds. So there was basically no downtime. Kept on training. Went to Worlds. Got sixth at Worlds. Um, and then we're done for the season. So it'll be off season training, and get ready for next season. LA's 4 years away, and I'm only getting better. I'm aging gracefully. So yeah, we're definitely going to go for LA. So there's a lot of races on the horizon, but hoping to also kind of parlay this into a podcast like this, where I can try to be a good voice for people that are facing not just adversity but traumatic injuries, whether it's spinal cord or whatever it is, and help them find a community that gives them a good forward direction.
Definitely, man. Commendable. We can definitely hook you up with some people too. We've done like 150 interviews, so
Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah,
Like, I think I can't speak enough about how important community is in general, but especially after a traumatic injury, or when you're living with a disability. That community can just change your life. So,
totally, man. Very cool. So we're coming to the end here now. We always like to ask, so if you can go back and maybe talk to your past self before the injury or whatever, someone else who went through a similar situation, what's some advice you'd give?
oh man, uh, I mean, the big piece of advice I always give is to try everything, and I think I got lucky. I kind of knew what I wanted to do in the military. Um, I knew I wanted to be a ranger, but that's just doesn't exist all the time. And the only way to find out what you're passionate about sometimes is to try everything, whether you're disabled or not. I say get out there and really take some chances, take some risks, and find what you're passionate about, and then go all in on it. I know that's what I've always done, and I've definitely, as you've seen, like, I've had great successes, and I've had huge failures, and you just got to take the wins the same way, or take the losses the same way you take the wins, and um, just don't let it stop you. Don't let anything stop you.
Perfect advice. So, what's your like social media, or like do you have a website or anything that we could follow you along on?
Yeah, I don't have a website or anything, but I have an Instagram that I'm pretty terrible at. It's actually my handle is I'm too old for IG.
That's good. Surprised that's not taken.
Right, right. I was surprised when it wasn't taken, but yeah, I jumped on it, and but eventually we're gonna probably shift gears this off season and build something a little more professional and try to make it have a lot more outreach to get people connected into the community and get people get them in the fitness world, get them into triathlon.
And when you start the podcast, I guess we'll see on Instagram where
Yeah,
we see that as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay, cool.
yeah.
Very cool, Howie. Thanks so much for taking the time, man.
No, I appreciate it.
Everyone else, thanks again for listening to another Fighter Heart podcast. We'll see you again next week.